Whether you're making images or videos, whatever it might be, you're in the right place. The Visual Lounge is about to begin live. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are, wherever you're watching. Welcome to the Visual Lounge. We are so glad that you're here today. It is another great show, of course. A couple things as we get going today, just as reminders that if you like the show, you got things you want to share with us, leave comments, leave your feedback. You can actually ask questions if you're watching the show live. If you're not watching the show live, it's a little harder to ask us questions, but you can. You can always email us at thevisuallounge@techsmith.com, or you can find us on social media. Just tag @TechSmith. I'm sure you'll find us, and we'd love to hear what you think of the show. With that said, the other thing is we actually have a new YouTube channel just for the Visual Lounge. You can find it on, if you go there to bit.ly/TVL, as in the Visual Lounge, TVL, subscribe, you'll be able to get to that new channel. We're going to be doing a simulcast for a little bit on the TechSmith channel still. We want to make sure everyone can still find us, and as we make that transition, we're still very much part of the TechSmith family, just trying to make sure it's all in one place so you can find the things that you're looking for, whether it's Andy's awesome videos and Aaron's awesome videos and other tutorial videos, or the Visual Lounge, which is a whole show by itself. So with that said, we have a show to do. So let's get into today's episode. Kassy LaBorie is a master virtual classroom trainer and the original virtual training hero on a mission to rid the world of boring slide reading lectures and passive live online participants. She's a principal at Kassy LaBorie Consulting, certifying L&D professionals to become virtual trainers, designers, and producers around the globe each day. Catch her sharing tips on how to be a virtual training hero at her online Hero Hangout the last Friday of each month, and on LinkedIn. You can learn more about her by visiting her website, which we'll drop in all the notes, which is KassyConsulting.com. So welcome to the Visual Lounge, Kassy. Oh, gotta get to the right place. There you are.
Thank you for having me, Matt. I am so excited to be here today.
Well, thank you for joining me. And if I'm not mistaken, I know for live people, we're in February. For people that they'll have to catch the one in March, but tomorrow's the last Friday of the month, I believe. So
yes, it is.
You're the last Friday. Oh no, I got to do that.
I know. No, yeah. Because are you talking about the heroes are gathering tomorrow? Yes. The heroes are gathering tomorrow. Normally I do it at 11 a.m. Eastern, so I can get some of my folks across the oceans to bring wine and cocktail hour with them. But tomorrow we're doing it at 2 p.m. Eastern. So it's a little bit later, but we're going to be doing some escape game stuff. I basically want to test out this new stuff that I learned from Rachel Arpin about using escape game learning methodology when we teach online. And I can't wait to test it out on all the heroes.
That sounds like a lot of fun. So guys, go check out Kassy's stuff, whether it's this Friday or whatever the last Friday in whatever month you're listening to this in. So Kassy, obviously when we read bios, it says a lot, but what did we miss that we should know about you going into our interview today?
Thank you. Yeah, like what about this whole virtual training hero thing? Where does that even come from? Right. And I work with people every day to help them be better at delivering virtual training. And that makes a whole lot more sense today than it did pre-March 2020. In fact, my mom finally knows what I do for work. It's wonderful. But I was reading about the hero's journey, the Joseph Campbell way of putting together stories and telling stories. And as I was just reading through that, which was completely separate, not related to work, I was like, you know what? Virtual trainers are heroes. They're superheroes. You're like fighting battles and, creating magical, what seem like, out of body experiences sometimes for people every day. And I just decided to write a story around that. And then, from that comes some characters. And then from that comes all sorts of things we can talk about what are virtual trainers doing every day to grow their skills and ultimately to help people connect this way. And so that's where that whole hero thing comes from. If anyone was wondering, why do we keep using this?
Yeah, well, I love it as someone who deals with heroes on a weekly basis in a game I play. I think it makes a lot of sense, right? Everyone loves to be the hero, and oftentimes we are not the hero. It's our customers and the people that we're talking to. So curious, as you talk about these heroes, let's lead us through your story of becoming a hero. How did you get into online training and producing in this world of learning and development? What's your path? And then we'll talk about some of the kind of foundational principles that you have to share with us.
Yeah, thank you so much for asking. And shout out to Jane Davis, by the way. Hi, Jane. uh, I kind of came across online training accidentally in some ways, but RuPaul had a whole lot to do with it. It was the late 90s. I lived in San Francisco, California, and I was driving down the very busy 101. And there was a giant billboard, and it featured RuPaul, and it said, "Meetings used to be a real drag." And it was an ad campaign for WebEx. And at the
Oh,
time, I was working as a Microsoft trainer, and I thought, I want to go work for WebEx because of RuPaul. And I got a job working for WebEx, teaching people, new clients, how to use WebEx, how to share their screen and all that business. And that led to where I am today, because I also have a background in public speaking and acting and theater. And I always say that, a lot of us trainers who actually have jobs, instead of going to auditions constantly, we become trainers in the corporate world. And so between RuPaul and having that background in acting, I became a trainer. And then because of the RuPaul connection, or at least inspiration, if you will, I
hmm
started working for WebEx. And people would say to me, okay, we get where to click, but how do we make people pay attention and be interested and ultimately learn? And that was actually to where my passion lied. And I know, from being a technical trainer to helping people be better at the technical training and ultimately all the training they were doing, is kind of how I got into all of that.
Well, that is fantastic because I think about the things that we do at TechSmith too, right? Like we help a lot of companies make software tutorials and videos, and but it's the same problem. Like you can even show people the buttons, but it doesn't mean you can get them to be interested in actually learning those things. So I'm curious from that point, let's say we want to help someone get more engaged in the learning process, and we want them, whether we're doing a virtual training or something else, what advice could you give us that would help us to um, you really make more engaging learning experiences? And I think there's lots of ways to engage people, lots of different types of experiences, but from your
Hmm.
perspective, what are those engagement points that you would recommend?
There are so many different ways, and I want to say my first answer is to say make sure you're connecting with the people and what they need and what they care about. But that is very closely connected to having the right technology and having good technology, because that will get in the way real quick. But technology alone isn't what's engaging people. It is ultimately what you're doing with it. And so I think we have to pay real close attention to. I think I shared with you recently that I've got this mantra, and it is very specific to when you are a presenter or a trainer. If you're wanting to engage your audience, my mantra is this: what did I just say that you could have said? Or you could look at it like this: what did I just do that you could have done? And if you think about that for just a moment, we are often engaged when we're involved and when it's important for us to be able to do something, to try something. If we bring it into the learning and development audience, I'm engaged by it. When I get to do it, it makes sense for me and it makes
hmm
me do my job better, or get the promotion that I'm seeking, whatever it may be. I'm not usually engaged because some person that I don't know is talking their head off at me. And so the mantra says, let them say it, let them do it. And then you're going to get to know them. You're going to be using the technology. You're going to be informed about what they're interested in, what they're challenged by. And then you can take your subject matter expertise and now tailor it to create an engaging experience for them. And if we look at engaging beyond fun, look at engage in the true sense of, I'm actually paying attention because I need this and it's working for me.
Yeah. So I love that, getting the idea of getting people to act, to say, like, it makes sense from a learning perspective. So you do a lot for people that maybe don't know, you do a lot of online virtual training, which is synchronous. So meaning people are together, but in a virtual environment. How do you manage to make that work? Because eventually I'm going to probably extrapolate this and say, like, okay, well, how can I do this for video? But I'm curious, from the environment you work in, how do you get people to do that? Because it seems like in the environment we're in right now, it's synchronous, right? We're together. And if you were to say to me, hey, Matt, go do something, it feels like I'm maybe getting distracted or pulled away. So what are some ways that you recommend to people to give them a chance to act and say, do kind of what your mantra was?
Yeah. I always like to ask first. So if we were even to take the example right now, like you and I are doing an interview and you're asking me, and that's how you're getting me to do the thing.
Right.
If you and I were teaching today with everybody here, when you asked me, what's one piece of advice that you would give, I would open with, let's go to the audience and ask the audience to share one piece of advice that they first have. What's one thing that you've learned? In fact, all of you could do it right now if you want to. What's one thing that you would tell the next virtual presenter to make sure to do, or you're checking out? What's
Yeah.
one piece of advice that you would give? Everyone, let's type that in the chat. And then I have this trick, and it's actually sitting here today. Look, it's my tiki. When I ask the question, I then stop talking and I take a drink of water. So you can think about your question, go to the chat, type it, send it, and then they're going to start coming through. And then I get to go, Jane, you're right. Smiling makes a big difference. And then I might say, if we were in a class, Jane, could you come off mute and explain to us why smiling is important to you and what it means to you? I haven't even done my part yet. All I've done is posed a question, ask the audience to respond, and then I can call on them and ask them to share. And the next thing you know, I've got a bunch of people talking, chatting, doing their thing. And I get to take what they've said, learn who they are, what their experiences are, and combine that with whatever I have planned next to share with them. And then all of this is going to lead to whatever else I might need them to do from there, right? But I always ask first to find out, and then it gives me clarity on where we can go from there.
Yeah, I think that's awesome. And I can see, so, I work in a primarily asynchronous environment when I'm doing stuff, like we put videos out and stuff like that. But I love that idea, right? Like get them to pause, think about, engage in some way. And now obviously I can't control anybody. And I'm guessing in a virtual environment, you can't control everybody. Not everyone's going to answer. Not everyone's going to put in a chat. But I can imagine if you can get somebody to do something, that's going to have a positive impact on their openness to learning. Kind of, they're going to start processing, they're going to engage with the content, because then they've kind of set up themselves to say, like, oh, I'm successful. I had an answer. Now, well, what are the other answers? So
it's like, I get to tailor it. I have the live audience, so I should tailor it. And it's like, if I've had a series of videos that I've asked them to watch, the videos are set and they've been made to be very clear in the content. And so that's an excellent way to share that. And now when they come live, let's work through that. What'd you love? What'd you hate? What didn't make sense? What are you going to be mad at? Let's work with it now, because in a video, I can't do that. And you don't want me to do that, which is why I also like a video of a live session when I teach them is not nearly as engaging as a video of a planned video that I would make of a session. Right.
Yeah.
And so bringing them together is so interesting, and we should take advantage of the live audience and the unexpected things that could happen from a live audience.
Oh, absolutely. Well, I know some of my favorite questions I've been able to ask to guests over time have come from the audience, right? Because it's led us down a path of their interest and the things that were kind of most meaningful to them. So that's a great plug. If people do have questions, feel free to put it in the chat. And if you're listening to the podcast later, send us those questions. I talked to Kassy.
Right? It's so cool to get to see that. And then we get to go, oh, that's what they need. And then now the definition of engagement is that they just noted what I said, and now I'm engaged. And on that goal, Christy makes a good point. Did you see that? About being clear. Be clear about what we're doing, because that's a whole nother thing. I'm going to say, these are the goals. And I often will make a joke, Christy. I'll say, did y'all sign up for the right class? Are you in the right place? This is what I had planned. Is that what you were thinking? And then they go, oh, I'm missing something, and go, what are we missing? And maybe I'll gather that and say, all right, let's figure out a way for you to get that, or, who can I send you to? It's so important to pay attention to what people need. And then they'll be engaged because they're being paid attention to.
Yeah. Yeah. So Christy actually asked a question that I think we should take here. He says, how many participants is too many that it hampers engagement? So from someone who's doing this a lot, like, what's the boundary?
Yeah, I love this so much. I love this. We could have a whole session on this, Christy. To me, numbers are driven by objectives. So what is it that we need to do? Importantly, what does the attendee or the participant need to do when we're done? And so numbers drive that. And I'm going to look at, like, so put yourself like in, for example, Matthew and I will be at a conference next week. The keynote will have everybody in the conference there, and the keynote will be engaging to thousands of people, and they'll do certain things to engage us. Are they going to call on like one person to raise their hand and ask questions in front of everybody? I hope not. That's why we have the breakout sessions. And even those could have maybe 50 to a couple of hundred people in them. And that's a large breakout for a conference. But think about the way I'm going to run the breakout when I speak is different than what the keynote's going to do or what I'm going to do at the expo. And then when I'm doing the training, like I just came off of one of my certification programs, I only have 6 people in there doing their teach backs because they're taking turns teaching and they need time, and we need the time for the feedback. So I think we can be engaging with any number, but we need to look first at what the objective is and then determine how many people can be there to achieve that objective.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I love that. I love that breakdown, and that's a very clear way to look at. And I imagine we can look at it in a lot of ways, but that made sense to me. So I want to make sure I want to go twist this conversation just a little bit, because one of the things that I want to make sure we're clear about is we're talking about live virtual events where we're synchronous, but when do you make the decision that something should be together? Like that makes sense because that's an investment in time, resource to be together. You got to figure out schedules, all that kind of stuff. Versus when does it make sense to actually do stuff that's asynchronous? And I know you focus primarily on the first and not the latter.
No,
but I'm curious from your perspective, when is it right to be one versus the other, or what would you use to make the decision?
Yeah, I actually have a 3-step process for this. It's like you knew, but I always say, well, first, what's the objective? What's the goal? Why is the company doing this thing? So let's just take my example because I can speak to that very quickly. Hey, company says our trainers need to be better at virtual training. That's the goal. And then, we learning and development professionals come in and we say, well, what's the objectives? What do better virtual trainers look like, act like? What do they do? And those are the objectives. And then we analyze each objective in step number 2. And I say to myself and the team, whoever I'm working with, which objectives do people need to learn live together? Which objectives are going to be best learned on their own? And in what way? Because there's so many ways we can create learning. And so I'm in no way a person who thinks that all things need to be learned live online, live in person. I think that there's a time and a place for everything. And sometimes you bring people live together because you're building the team, you're onboarding, and they need to be together just to get to know each other. When I do the 3rd step in the plan, by the way, is to then look at your Zoom, your WebEx, in my case, and then say, okay, the objectives where they need to be live together, let's now look at the features of the Zoom, the WebEx, the Teams, the whatever. And then I design from there. But in the middle there, that 2nd step of what do people need to be together live to do? If we look at my Train the Trainer program, I'm teaching people how to be virtual trainers. So you would imagine, let's say that their company uses Zoom. I'm going to deliver it on Zoom. And guess what? One of the objectives, manage the features of Zoom. All right. You need to be good at using Zoom. And so I will model it and demo it, and we will use it together through activities when we are live, but they have independent assignments where they have to open up their own Zoom sessions by themselves. They work through documents. They watch a few videos on the step-by-step process of how Zoom works. And then we get back together and I go, what happened? What went wrong? What didn't work? What did work? And then I help them live through those things. But the steps on where you click, on how to do a breakout, do a poll, those things don't really change until they update the software, but that's a whole separate thing. But I don't need to take you through that. So for me, it's all about live. To shorten it back up, a blend is what's so perfect. And we, I think, make a lot of mistake where I see this a lot, where we just, and probably you see it differently because of the different worlds that we're in. But what I end up seeing is we just do everything live because we don't have anyone to develop the videos and they're too hard, they take too long. And let's just do it live. And then everyone's asleep. I'm like, why don't you just get it, let them do that on their own. And then that leads to a whole nother thing. How do we get them to do it on their own?
Yeah.
But yeah, that's a thing. But that's a whole nother session.
Well, but I love it, right? Because I think that's the crux of it, that the world we live in, as crazy as everything is that you need there's a variety of skills here that we need. And if we're the visual lounge here, we'll take some licenses with that. It means we're looking at all visuals. And, there's a reason we do a live show versus we could pre-record this and it would probably be great. And, people would probably still watch it. But we like the live. And what is it? One of the things it does for us, and maybe this is true about training, is it puts a date and time on the calendar that people can show up. It means that I know I'm going to spend that time delivering, whether it's a guest or whether it's me presenting, whatever. And it makes it so if we have errors, which guys, we know we have plenty of errors. We got technical issues at times. We got all sorts of reasons that things that don't work perfectly, but it's done. And then we can take that and use it.
Here, like I get to talk to Christy, I get to talk to Jane, and there's that chance that you're going to get your specific situation, question, comment, joke, whatever it may be. You're part of that moment. And that in and of itself is engaging.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, Kassy, I want to shift gears a little bit, and because one of the things we actually titled this episode, not before we'd even really talked about what we were going to talk about, I mentioned producing because I know that's something you've been known for, and I think there's some crossover skills here. When you do these live events, you often, I know, have a virtual producer that's helping because you're doing the instruction, or maybe you're producing, but you've got someone else doing the instruction. Let's talk about that role a little bit, though. What does it mean to have someone producing a live event?
Yeah, thank you for asking. I love this topic as a technical trainer first. I do love the technology and I want it to be perfect. And sometimes that will take me away from paying attention to what you just said. So the producer is the person paying attention to the technology, the logistics, you could say. The trainer or the presenter is paying attention to the content, and most importantly, the meaning, the making meaning and the connection of that content for the participants. And if one person is doing both, usually what happens is that you stop doing one to focus on the other. So if I'm focusing on delivering content, listening to what you have to say, thoughtfully commenting, making bridge statements to the next moment, I'm unlikely to be also going to find that poll and figuring out when to launch it, where to click to stop it and share the results, right? So it's a division of labor that very beautifully works together in a live online event. And that's why I make a producer part of a regular way that I deliver sessions, especially the training sessions and large webinars that I'm delivering to.
Yeah, it makes sense that you've got someone that can focus on the kind of almost the flow, the technology, the parts and pieces that need to move, but they're not focused on the content. So what makes someone a good producer though? Let's start there, because I got lots of questions in my head, because it seems like, okay, I can learn some technology. But it seems like that's probably I'm oversimplifying what our virtual producers do.
Well, and I've learned over my career that there's different types of producers, but at the baseline, it's a person who's going to manage the technology. And they may or may not be helping you out with the delivery. So if you think about sort of classic, like when we if I go back to the conference example, when we go to the conference, we show up in the room and then the audio people come in and they sort of connect us and we just sort of plug in our computers and I display it, but I'm not the one who put that display there. And I didn't put the tables and chairs in there and all of that, so a producer, the person who makes a good producer first and foremost is somebody who's really interested in the tech and the whole management of the event, if you will, I don't know. Sometimes people refer to it's an old school TV show, Frasier, and you have Roz and then you have Frasier talking on air, right? Mm-hmm. And Roz is running the show. And cue this, cue that, keeping them on time. So people that really like to be organized, who like to dig into technology, and who like to keep people on track and make things move, they make really great producers.
Yeah, I actually hadn't thought about that, and we should probably look into getting one of those for this show. but I love that, right? Someone who can keep the timing fresh, keep on top of the things that are happening. Because I do think it's probably more than just a technical aspect. Yes, you got to push the buttons, make sure things are working. But I love that idea, especially if you have a very fixed time. We're pretty fluid in the show. Like we can flow through things as we go. We roughly get an hour. If we stopped right now, you and I care, but probably maybe no one else, they're grateful.
I mean, it requires like a plan. So at the base, a producer is managing the tech. What I have learned throughout the years, though, and I wrote about this in my producing virtual training book, is that the second type of producer is a facilitative producer. And I think it's kind of like what you and I are doing right now, where you're able to speak to the content. And I don't know that I know the tech here as much in this particular platform. But, you know, if we were teaching together, I would manage the tech while you were talking and doing your part. And then we would swap roles. So the facilitative producer knows the content. And together they deliver the session. And I think, yeah, it's interesting what we're talking about there too. You see in the chat about moderator versus producer. There's lots of names, you know, host. And I think a moderator is somebody who is more speaking. Usually in my case, in my experience, the moderator is sort of introducing the next speaker and moderating the event, maybe commenting on it. And then you'd have a technical producer taking care of lights, camera, action, if you will. So it's interesting. You have to have a plan about the way you're going to do it, because there are different ways to do it. And what I love about working with a producer is that over time you build relationship and then you start to read each other's minds. And that's where the whole hero part comes in. You know, like it's amazing to me when I have several producers I work with, and they just know what's coming next and they've already got it happening in the chat. And I'm about to say it. And then I go, all right, well, my producer's already said what we're going to have happen. And that was amazing. You know, and then I just can take a deep breath and go, wow, I love this job.
Yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, it's interesting as I think about the parallels to what you're talking about to, you know, like obviously for a live show, we've got Jessie, who works on our social media team, and she's awesome. She's in the chat for us, right? Making sure that and feeding me kind of key questions or things so I don't miss, because I kind of see them, but sometimes it gets super busy and I can't keep up. But then we've got, you know, in the background, you know, technically someone who's running the show, switching cameras, doing all that stuff. And just behind the scenes here, Kassy, you didn't even see this. I was getting notes about my microphone.
Oh, yeah, of course. That could happen to me too when I'm teaching. They're like, we can't hear you. And then I can see it. And then I'll just keep teaching and people won't have to know that there might have been a problem. And, you know, here's another thing. It's not that I'm not paying attention to the tech when I teach. It's that I know the producer is going to lead on it and take care of it. So I don't have to focus on it, which lets me focus on what people are saying and what they're learning and allowing me to tailor that experience. And I will often... Julie is one of my main producers right now. Shout out to my pal, Julie. And I'll say to her, like, we might get into a deep conversation about whatever we're talking about in that moment. And then I'll go, Julie, what's happening in the chat? What did I miss while we were all talking away? And Julie will come in and say, oh, Kassy, I'm so glad you asked. And she'll debrief it. And while she's doing that, I'm reading the chat. And then I'm seeing it and I'm going, yeah, okay, I got you. And so it's like a radio show that way. It's amazing.
Yeah. So I'm going to make another correlation here because I think based on our audience, so things that you're saying are really good. So I know you and I have recently talked about making videos and you know, it's not a shameful thing to say that not everyone is on top of making videos when they come on the show. We know it's not a skill set everyone has. That's why we have resources. That's why we work with people. But it's interesting that some of the things you're saying about like making a live event also apply to making videos. Like so for TechSmith Academy, we did this video series about screen recording, and it's like 30 videos long. And they're like short, 2-minute videos, right? But it was all scripted. And one of the best things that would happen during that production is I didn't just go and do it myself. I had someone who was looking at the camera, making sure I looked good. Like they were actively watching for that. They were listening to the things I was saying. We actually had and we had an intern at the time that was very interested in production, come and mark the script as I said it. And and made notes about takes, because I say stuff sometimes, like I'm reading, and you know how I won't share your example, but when you were introduced on a certain podcast and they said something and didn't realize what they said, right? Like sometimes I say stuff and I don't realize I said it wrong, or I just didn't pronunciate it right. See, I just did it. I didn't pronounce it correctly.
You pronunciated it wrong.
I pronunciated it wrong. But having someone
I'll miss things, you know, like sometimes I'll miss things, and Julie will send me a message saying, you know, call on Jake next. Jake just sent out some cool chats that you didn't see, you know, and then I'll go, hey, Jake, tell us more, you know, and it's just kind of prompting me as you would have in say like a studio setting, like you said. and you can just be better at what you're doing. So, as a live facilitator, as a person recording video, you also have to have the flexibility, the skills, the confidence, to be able to take that and go with it too, right?
Yeah. So let me ask you this, because I think this might be some parallels here, and I hope you're enjoying this coverage. I'm really enjoying the things I'm bringing from you today.
Yeah.
Live is scary for some people. And there's the typical reasons: they don't like their own voice, they don't want to be on camera, blah blah blah. But live mistakes, and I'm just over it. I'm gonna make lots of mistakes. It doesn't bother me so much anymore. But I can imagine that's a problem for people who are presenting these live classes, that you're worried, because often they are recorded, and I want to say something that was wrong or incorrect. So what advice do you give to people about mistakes in this process of virtual training?
Well, I said the last time I checked, I don't think they're there to learn about you. So they're not paying as much attention to you as you are. And in fact, you need to be paying more attention to them. And guess what? We're all also human. And they will respect you a whole lot more if you just keep going and keep the focus on them and their needs. They'll be more annoyed if you keep calling out your mistakes or if you're unable to get past them. And so people appreciate, especially in today's day and age, authenticity and the ability to continue in a respectful and thoughtful and authentic way.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
love it. I mean, and hopefully everyone is patient enough to give us all a little bit of grace, right? Because we all make mistakes. So we've all been there. The audience for this show only has a couple more times they can give me, but we're working on it. So
Yeah, I mean, I try to be as real as possible with people, and then I want them to be real too. And that's the environment I'm in too. I'm I'm teaching people things, and I'm teaching people, in my case, to become trainers too. And so I do need them to be vulnerable. And so in some ways, it's valuable when I make mistakes because that shows me being vulnerable.
yeah.
So I get to use that in my world, in my line of work. I get to use my mistakes. Lucky me. You know? But you know,
No, I think that's great. I love the conversation about vulnerability. I think it's hard to remember when you're doing stuff, when you're supposed to be the quote unquote
I
the
know.
expert, right? But I think that makes a lot of sense, and I think it works for asynchronous videos as well, to be aware of the mistake. And sometimes that's a training situation. Sometimes you can edit it out, fortunately, but in live
Yeah,
training,
it's
definitely.
different thing with videos. Like there is a thing about videos have to be perfect. I think when we're live, we get a little bit of a break. As long
Yeah.
as you can keep going with it. It's like live theater. And when you go to a Broadway show versus the movie, which has been edited 1,000 times for perfection. It's interesting. So
Yeah.
those two play out differently. I'm actually more nervous making a recording than going live probably because of this. I very much feed off of an audience, and I feel like I can course correct as we go. Whereas in video, I'm like, did I do that right? Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think from a philosophy standpoint of what we teach, I would say that to me that's really interesting that you feel so vulnerable, because I think being in front of and I don't mind live audiences at all. Like that's like I love stages. I love being on the stage. I love presenting. But I think it's a lot of people feel the same way as you do. But I think the big difference is we set this expectation, this bar, that it needs to be perfect for some reason, when
Right.
unless it's an egregious error that's going to lead someone down a really bad path, like they're going to blow things up, they're going to ruin their software or whatever, you're going to get hurt. I feel like, I mean, really, what's the harm if we can, maybe can we have fun with it? Even can it be valuable, like you said, a
Yeah.
learning experience? I wonder if we put too much pressure on ourselves because it's of expectations of Hollywood and TV versus when you're live, no one's
Yeah.
rewinding.
I mean, I don't want to waste people's time. If I make a
Yeah.
mistake, I'm not, that's the thing. Like when I think in video, you have to get it right. The video that people are watching, people have to see right. But when I'm live, I also don't necessarily, I can't always be perfect, but I do need to be aware of the time that you're spending with me. And is that time worth it for you? And so it's like, if my slide didn't move or my slide is wrong, you don't want me to hang on that forever. And so I do need to be flexible enough to say the slides aren't working, folks. Let's go to the chat and you can refer to page 10 in your handout while we continue through. And then that's when producer's madly fixing my slides and I'm going to try to focus on what's coming in the chat. And then once the slides are fixed again, I got to be like, all right, they're back. So let's proceed with what's on the next one. I have to be able to do that. And I think people respect that you make the choice to pay attention to their experience versus your own stuff.
Yeah. Although, see, what I'm thinking is I'll just cut out that part, easy peasy, throw it away, and then just my slides are working again, or I can stop the recording and restart it. So,
I mean, you can for a video, and you should, because who wants to see that in a video? You know,
right.
you don't.
Right.
But in the moment, you've seen it. It's done. We got to fix it. Move on.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, I want to, is it okay if we look at the resource that you're offering, folks? We'll just briefly go through it because I think it's such a valuable thing and it's free. People love getting things. So I'm going to bring that up on the screen. And will you just talk us through why should someone download this? What is it that they're going to get when they go? And we have the website. Jesse, we'll put it in the chat and we'll put it in the show notes so they can get access to it. So
excellent. Yeah, look at this. So in 2020, I actually had written the whole story about becoming a virtual training hero. And I hired an artist to create this artwork for me. And then over that whole year, I was posting tips on LinkedIn that were coming from virtual training that I was delivering. And so FYI, when you read these tips, know that it was happening with trainers out there in the world. And I would go and write a tip going, don't do that again. Essentially, or maybe I did it, And so what you have in here is first, I just start off with what is the hero's journey, which is a reference to the Joseph Campbell structure for telling a story. And then you can see the wonderful artwork that the artist Kimmy King made for me. I live in Rochester, New York, and she was attending the Rochester Institute of Technology. I had posted the job. And so for any of you that are out there that work for yourself and you'd like original art, try your local university. If you team there, I just posted it and I said, listen, I'm a person who has a small business and I'm looking for some original art she was in her final year, 2D animation. And she and I got together and she made these for me. And I still work with her today. She graduated a couple of years ago. And you can see she made some artwork for me. And I just started telling the story of the challenges of being a virtual trainer and the nemesis that you must defeat. And so that's what this whole book then is. It became a compilation of all of the tips that I had shared in 2020, all in one place, so that you don't have to go try to find all my posts on LinkedIn. And so I sort of bookended it with the story in the front and then some, final thoughts on the end. But this is kind of, for me too, Matt, like this is a way I'm a creative and I'm not an instructional designer. I'm mostly a trainer, facilitator, and presenter. And I do design my programming myself, but this is where I get to have fun just playing with design. And I love anything that's going to be colorful and going to catch your attention. And so as much as this was work, this was also just extraordinarily enjoyable for me to create, put together.
Yeah. And for our audience, just so everyone knows, Kassy's got to turn these into videos. That's what we want to see, Kassy. Everyone's going to want it now because I'm just going to keep projecting it to the universe. Okay. And when we see each other,
I'm so happy that I know you because yes, let's make these videos.
Next week we're going to come up with a whole plan. There we go. When between conference sessions, we're gonna get you make one thing. So I love this, and I think it's such a great resource. And I think I'm always I'm a big fan of taking things and obviously applying it to my circumstances. We do enough live events. We've got webinars. Our great technical customer education team is doing. We've done more marketing type webinar events, and we do learning events, and we do the show. And so I can't wait to go through it and just see. Take in the tips and say like, well, how does that apply to what I'm doing? And I think that's
I love it. I couldn't love it more because I think that, I have what I do and then there's this piece, but then, all of us have different skill sets and different things. And I would love nothing more than it to come alive in form of video. Because the one thing about my virtual training superheroes is that they do need to be flying through the universe and they're not yet doing that. And we need that. And I know Kimmy would love to draw those up. So
Well, I'm going to bring up this one. Just ended on my screen, and I thought, wow, this is very appropriate, right? So, we're gonna call it a mistake, and not because it's a mistake, but more just a reality of what happened. Before the show, I've got a little cough, right? And so I was like, oh gosh, what am I gonna do when I need to cough? There's a button I can find, but it's harder to click on, and so I set up a hotkey on my little Stream Deck pad to mute my microphone. So the strategic managed muting, unmuting. But the problem is the hotkey only works if the streaming software is the active piece of software. So when I'm scrolling through the document, my hotkey doesn't work. It pulls up something in Chrome. So I have my mute and unmute, and I just missed it a second ago when I was coughing. But it's like, it's such good advice. Like, and it dawned on me, like, yes, I need to be able to manage that better. But like, someone probably doesn't think about that.
Where that comes from, I saw somebody posting on LinkedIn that in virtual training, you need to make sure you always mute your audience. And I had this like visceral like reaction to it, because I'm like, I literally cannot stand teaching to a muted audience. I want you to talk and laugh and cough. I want it to be like you're here with me. Otherwise, I'll go make a video. Okay, it'll be perfect. But I want the live, mess, if you will. And so for me, if you're muted, I'm sort of bummed. It's like, that's one of the things that people don't like about virtual training. You ask a question, there's this long pause, nobody responds. And then somebody finally decides to come off mute, and they come off mute. It takes forever. And they come up. By the time they're responding, because they've been muting, the whole moment is gone. Yeah. And so that's where that came from for me, where I'm like, okay, I understand we need to mute. We have children and dogs and things, which we love dearly, but I know that they disrupt and it can be distractions. So manage the distractions, but also teach people how to effectively manage the mute so they can quickly come off and laugh and spontaneously respond to what we're learning in that moment.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's messy, but it can be fun, and I love it. Okay. Looking at time, Kassy, what we're going to do, I want to get to our speedrun questions, but before we do that, just so anyone's like, I hate the speedrun questions, where can they find you? Where should they look to get your information? We'll drop the links again, of course, but where should we connect with you?
The best place right now, two best places, my website, KassyConsulting.com, and it's freshly redesigned, just 2 weeks old, so go check it out, see what you think. And then LinkedIn. I'm quite active on LinkedIn, so you can find me there as well.
Perfect. I was going to say Jane Davids put an awesome quote, and I had to read it twice because it says, looks super Kassy. And I thought she was making a pun that it looked super classy, Kassy. So it looks super Kassy.
Kassy is like in superhero.
Like superhero and it's classy Kassy. So anyway, let's get done with my puns and let's go on to our speedrun questions. Okay, speedrun questions for anyone that don't know. These are super fast, meant to be answered. Quick questions for Kassy that we're going to go through. And every speedrun is unique except for a couple questions. So first question, what's your favorite tip that you can give anyone getting into training?
It's not about you.
Not about you. Love it.
It's about your participants. It is about your participants and what they need and how you can help them with that. But honestly, not unless you're like really famous. Not about you.
Not about me. It's about you, Kassy. Today it's about you. It is about you today, actually. But okay, second question. If you had to shift careers and out of the world of learning development, what would you do?
Oh my goodness. I have a very high interest in anything mid-century modern. You can see behind me the Viking glass. It's stretched glass vases that are there. I love that. And so I would be in the design world, and I'd be focusing on helping people redo their mid-century modern homes.
Oh, that sounds very cool and very interesting. Love it. Love it. Not the answer I expected, but that's okay. That's not why I asked it. I didn't have a expected answer. Okay, Next one. Where do you turn for inspiration? You obviously have some very cool stuff that you've done with your website. You teach, train, creatively, you got to fill that bucket somehow. Where do you look for inspiration?
I love my network and people that do different things than me. And then also the superheroes come from my own personal interest in anything that's science fiction or fantasy. I love that whole genre of the world. I even love horror. I love vampires. So I find I love all of that as well. And I think that's where you find the superhero coming, because I'm reading something completely separate and I'm going, wait, that's us too, you know. And I also just love to get outside, and like I love paying attention to working out, and I also have 2 cats, and so those kind of things. Those are a lot of answers, but things outside and off of the computer help me to get inspired too.
Yeah. Well, I don't know how yet, but we need to play Dungeons and Dragons sometime.
Yeah,
at a conference when I run a game, we'll have to play.
I'm no good at it, but I find it interesting that you do it.
I know you like acting. I know you like fantasy now. There we go. That's you need no more than that, than a passive interest. So
can I do a fairy in D&D?
Yeah, I'm sure we can make it work. We can make it work.
Right.
It's open. Okay, last speed round question, and then I think we'll check to make sure if there's any questions from the audience. And this is, I'm gonna warn you, this is always the hardest question people tell us, our guests tell us. But the question is, what's a question you'd like to ask me?
Ooh. I am wondering, when is your first open date on your calendar so we can talk about making the superhero videos?
Yeah.
Because I am so interested in doing that and so excited about that.
Let's sometime after Training Magazine, which for people that are listening to the recording was the first week of March, but we'll start small. Let's start hour consultation.
That's great. And I thought of a second question too, like if we're to get back on the topic. Like for me, a person who comes in from, the live training side of things, I think that for us, we don't necessarily know like how can I get started with making videos that would be helpful for me? Like, what if I'm a person who is a presenter and I really wish I had some great videos as performance support or something that I can share with an audience, like where would I even begin to make something that would look good and that people like who work at TechSmith wouldn't laugh at me? Not that you would, you know what I'm saying?
We would not laugh at you. I've seen a lot of videos in my day, and some of them are really not good. I've never laughed at them though. I've just said, "Oh, we can make that better." Honestly, I'll tell you the same thing I tell our audience all the time is I think just go make your first bad video. Just get it over with, right? Do something, and you will be inherently unhappy with it because you'll look at it and you'll try to compare to something else that someone else has done. And this is where the quote, "comparison is the theft of joy," or is the thief of joy, comes in, because I think you have to start where you are. Now, I think with your skills, someone like you with your skill set, you've got a great foundation on how to talk to a camera already, how to talk to your audience in a way that's going to make sense. You're an expert in your knowledge. So now it's just about bringing a couple of those pieces together, and where I think you'll find that you'll probably spend most of your time is things like the branding, but you already got great branding that you can pull in. You'll then figuring out how to piece things together, because that's not a skill that like we learn in school. Like you learn how to edit words,
right?
Like you learn how to like what makes for a good sentence structure, and you don't have that vocabulary yet and I don't mean a literal vocabulary, but a vocabulary of what makes for good editing. But it's learnable, and it's a lot of initially intuition, right? Like you're like, oh, this feels right, or oh, something's off here. How do I tighten this up? But it starts with just starting to do it, and then obviously we have tons of resources to help individuals like yourself with like our TechSmith Academy, depending on what you're trying to do, right? But there's realize there's lots of videos, lots of video types. There's the me on camera talking to you. There is the like, I've already got a presentation. Let me make a PowerPoint recording and turn that into something a little bit more dynamic. Screen recordings, and there's action. Like we're going to just make the simplest one that whatever is most comfortable for you, and purposely,
just do it.
Do it and work on like, okay, how do I put two pieces together? Do they fit? Oh yeah. Or what happens if I overlap here? This visual, and again, remember it's a very visual medium. Just like anything, you want to make sure your visuals are good, and because I know your audio and your voice and the things you say are going to be good. It's going to be trimming that up a little bit and then figuring out what are the things that I'm showing.
Looking slick, smart and stuff. It's so interesting to me. Like I saw, I think Jane said I'm more comfortable on video than I am live. And I think there's a side of me, I fight against this. There's a perfectionist side that I think the video world would feed very nicely because you can make it so nice. Because I think what we have to as live presenters get over is that desire for that. Mm-hmm. And I'm so used to feeding off of that. Like, I guess you could say it's improvisation, that when I'm in front of a camera with no audience, I'm kind of like, what am I supposed to do? And it's an interesting thing where I'm almost like, when I present, if any of you have ever seen me present before, I always start with a question, which we talked about earlier. But as soon as you respond to me and give me stuff, I'm way more comfortable. And then I can go, all right, I can work with what you just gave me. So the video is like the opposite of that for me. It's why it's very nerve-wracking for me to make them.
Yeah. I mean, we can turn this into our consulting session, but I almost imagine easy way to start for you is like, what is that question that you want to answer? And what if someone came up to you and said, hey, Kassy, this is a question. How would you respond to that individual? Even though you like, think about that, your audience, you know who they're talking to, and just talk to that person, right? Like and that's all the video has to be is I'm going to answer this one question in this narrow, very kind of narrow frame. And let me just tell you, and it's like, you're going to send them that answer. Like you might answer them an email now, but what if you send them a video answer? What would that look like?
I know. But okay, immediately what's going through my head right now, because I've got that question. It needs to go on my website. What is engaging virtual training? Immediately I'm like, ooh, I have to say it perfectly. And it has to be the exact words. And I got to think about the perfect way to say it. Like no one else has ever said it before. Immediately I go to all the things that will stop me from doing it. But I'm fine. I love how this has turned into the Kassy Consulting Hour.
I love these questions because it's the same questions I think a lot of us are asking when we're getting started to do video or worried about doing video. Like the things that you just said, it has to be perfect. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. Yep. Look at YouTube. Look how successful so many people are on YouTube, and it's not. There's a lot of great, really polished things, but there's a lot of not perfect. People want your answers. People want to hear from you. They want authentic.
Exact coaching I give my facilitators and trainers. Exactly what you're saying to me. It's hilarious to me. I love this.
It's really the world is very small and then overlapped. Before we wrap up, I do want to get to the question from Tim asked. I think it's a good one. Yeah. He says, for larger live virtual events, could you include your thoughts on including a director role in combination with technical producers? So I'm guessing a director role is maybe overseeing, I'm guessing these are big, like day-long events with maybe multiple presenters and things like that.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, you think about people that, all these shows we watch nowadays, Dancing with the Stars and all this stuff. You have like the judges and you have the talent, but then you have that person who's directing everything. And there's probably also there's a ton of directors behind the scenes too. So I think the larger the event, the more components that you have to bring together, it's going to be valuable to have somebody overseeing all of it so you can stay on brand and, stay organized with what the intention is each moment. Absolutely. I'm a big fan of all of it. And I think that the conferences that are more successful are the ones that are paying attention to having people in roles to manage all of the logistics of bringing it together. At each level, like the session level, but also the event level too.
Yeah, we did it was only 4 hours. It's big. 4 hours is a lot. But we had someone that was at that kind of level overseeing all the slots, making sure content was going to flow, making sure we had we had a producer. He was an on-air producer. So he's kind of doing like the in-betweens, almost like an MC. And then we had each presenter, and it made it so nice to know that like, all I have to do is show up and worry about my part of it, which was a big part. Like presenting is a big part, but it was really nice to have something like that.
Nice clarity, because especially in this online world, we're looking for some boundaries of where do I go, when do I go, what do I do, what happens next, and there's consistency with something like an MC coming in to begin and close and transfer us to the next part, and it's kind of what makes it an event if you do that.
Yeah.
So yeah.
And that translation to video is having a director, someone that's looking over across your videos, across the scheme of things to help you make sure you're being consistent and your tone, voice, look, feel, all that stuff is
tying together when it should be played and for how long and at what part would that be most beneficial for the viewers, for sure.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Kassy, thank you so much for joining me. I just love talking to you. I'm excited I get to see you in real life soon, and we'll get to hang out. But wonderful information. So thank you so much for being here.
Thank you for having me today. And thanks also to all the people contributing and guiding our conversation as well.
Yeah, always great. Always great to have those folks here. So, Kassy, thank you so much. And thank you to all you guys for tuning in, watching with us, and joining in. For those listening to the podcast, don't forget, you can always email us your questions or comments to the Visual Lounge at techsmith.com. Now, don't forget, new YouTube channel. Make sure you go subscribe. I'll put up that bit.ly once again, so you can go bit.ly/TVL subscribe. All the shows are eventually going to be over there on. That's where we're going to live stream to. We'll do a simulcast for a couple more weeks here and make sure we get you all transitioned. And that's where it's going to be, though. But thank you everybody for tuning in and listening. We know it's a crazy time in the world right now. Always things are happening. Every kind of week, new things are taking place. And so normally I tell you to take some time to level up. Maybe this week, take some time to take a deep breath. There's something about taking time to just take some time for yourself. Make sure you're in a good place and do what you need to do to be good, because that actually is going to help you to level up every single day. Thanks, everybody. We will see you all next time.